Admit it. When I said I was going to come back quick, you doubted me. And you should have, because every other time I've said it, I haven't done it. But as you know, the deadline hits next week when I really kick it into madness mode. So even though not a lot has happened since the last update, I wanted to give a pre-madness look at our NBA pool. So this should be considerably quicker. I'm doing something slightly different for the teams. The players, there's not a lot to update. A couple injuries. The odds haven't really changed too much, just a couple tweaks. And then obviously we have February's player of the month. I will still do a bit of a segment at the end, but in theory, this should be quicker. In theory. Let's see how I do. As I said, it hasn't been that long, so my tiers aren't really that different. I wanted just a kind of a different format, so it goes a little bit faster. I'm not editing some stuff in, and there's not as many breaks. This is pretty close to what I had last time with a few differences because of injuries or just because of how teams have been playing recently. So just to get down to it, our Vegas odds right now for the most probable final is the game that just actually, in time of recording, happened last night. The Nuggets did win, and they looked like they were in control, even though Jaylen Brown went off, but he couldn't hit a free throw, and he definitely didn't hit that three at the end. So this could have been a different matchup, but they're 2-0 against the Celtics. I think if we had a final, I'd still have Denver. I mean, if you got to put money on it, you got to bet on them. But as we're going to see with the flawed contenders, they're going to have a tougher road, whereas Boston, I think, might have an easier path to the final. But if it's the Nuggets, I don't love the Celtics' chances. We also have some questions about what they do in some of their tight games. I mean, they look great against the Warriors, obviously, but if you look, they hit legitimately everything. Like, they just kept hitting threes, and they went off. When they get to close games, they do these weird things. Tatum brings the ball up super slow. It's like a static one-on-one offense. It's not great. It's still great. They're a great team, but you know what I mean? When it comes in the playoffs, I'm not sold. For our flawed contenders, I do have the Thunder. Now, you'll notice here there's a Band-Aid, and that actually is going to include some teams that normally would have been up here and then maybe some that are down here, so don't panic quite yet. I just think the injury is pretty significant. We obviously found here Karl Anthony Towns is going to get his meniscus tweaked, looked at. So he's out till probably the playoffs and possibly missing the first round or maybe longer. That's never a great thing. I still have the most flawed contenders. If that was Ant-Man, then they would be in Band-Aid issues. But I think that they still probably have enough to scoot. To throw another team from the West in there, like I said, the Nuggets are going to have a harder run because unless one of these teams get upset, this could be your Western Conference semifinal. And I think all of these will be tight series for different reasons. The only other East team, I didn't have them in it last time. I'm putting them in it now. The Bucks post All-Star break. Maybe Doc was right when he said, wait, you should have waited to put me in. It's because it takes time to develop the system. Now, I still have a little bit of concern. Obviously, Lillard's still, I don't know. It's Dame time, but Dame time very rarely involves any kind of defense. But they have enough around that seem to be okay right now. And again, I think the East is kind of weak. Put them in Boston in a series. I think Boston's the better team, but could the Bucks just kind of, I was going to say buck it out, but that sounds like it would be dirtier than it was. Just because this format is really funky, I'm actually going to get rid of the race to the bottom right away. We talked about the Pistons, although, what did I say? I know I'm not the only one, so I'm not taking full credit for this. I don't think that they're going to finish last. Where is the last team? Not only is it the last team, I can't even find them. There they are. Okay. Right now, I think Detroit has actually technically passed the Wizards, so well done. But hey, we still got 20 games to go, just under. This could go back and forth, but these are our bottom two. On the other side, I do think, I'm trying to talk and look at the same time, I think the Spurs are playing actually a little bit better, but I think they dug themselves into quite a hole. I think Portland's not doing so great, and they've got some injuries on their own, so I think these are the four that two of them will end up in the negatives, so that's why I put them there. In terms of the one piece away versus playoffs are the ceiling versus Band-Aid issues. So these are all teams that this could be more of a fluid list, and it's not necessarily fair. I actually put the Magic into one piece away. As of right now, I think it's Boston, Milwaukee, still Cleveland. We'll get to them in a second. And then Orlando. They've actually gone to fourth. And I think with all the injury concerns that we're going to see in the East, I don't think in any world they actually win the East, but could they make the East final if they get favorable matchups? I mean, maybe. If not, could they hold on and lose to the Celtics, which would still for them be okay because that would be in the second round? I mean, it wouldn't be my pick, but Maybe. And they're certainly one piece away in that regard. I had Miami here because Miami's just that annoying team that everything seems to go their way, but also in the softer East. I also could see them tanking, to be honest. I actually don't think they're a great team, but I think the way things are going, if they added a piece, they'd be fine. I think Indy in the same bit. When they get hella competitive, they get in there, but it's consistency that drives them, which I don't know if you've heard, but the playoffs is best 4 out of 7, so that might not be phenomenal for them. And then weirdly enough, and I know I might take some heat on this one, the West is really tough, and I think there's a lot of decent West teams that I would just put should be happy to get in the playoffs. There's going to be 1 or 2 that I think might make you mad. The weird one I'm going to throw in, it's not just because I took them. I meant to put up here. I don't think the Lakers are going to go very far, and actually Golden State is doing more to prove that they should be here right now. It's just when it comes to LeBron in the playoffs, and I'm not saying it's just because he gets calls. It's not that. They just seem to bring out enough that could the Lakers be the team that tops somebody into the top 4? I don't think so. But also, if they added anything, maybe. I don't know. I really wanted to put Golden State here, but I just think, and I think you could have the argument that they should be in here over the Lakers. I just think that they're actually peaking right now, and that's about as best they can do. Now, I've skipped over some teams. Obviously, the Knicks are falling right now because they are massively hurt. They're still going to make the playoffs, but they really just need to focus on getting healthy, and then obviously people might not want to play them. The Cavs have not had a full starting roster, even though they're in 3rd, so you probably should argue they're one piece away. I think not only are they injury concerns, but honestly, who's playing well when they're hurt and when they're these different... I sense tension up ahead is what I'm essentially trying to say. Where is, and Chainer's already yelling at me, how is he not in here? Obviously 76ers, and we'll see what happens if people can get healthy. And by people, I mean one particular person. I think they were actually gearing up for it, and for them, it's treading water as best they can, and I haven't heard a more up-to-date report, but they could be dangerous. I'm throwing the Suns in here. I think there's a world where the Suns actually could be the team that should belong here and the one piece away, and their one piece would be if everyone can be healthy all the time. It's just they haven't really been fully healthy the whole time, and Durant hasn't gotten hurt yet. I say yet because every year he needs to take some time off. It's hard for him to do the full season. Now he's had some bits and bobs off, but for me, they're just a team that is really dictated by that. And then a way drop of the bucket, a very different issue. The Hawks aren't going to do anything. At best, they'd be in this playoffs or the ceiling, but they actually might lose the spot if the Nets weren't openly tanking, and I think that they honestly are. Trae Young getting hurt, and they're not playing super well right now. In terms of the playoffs, are the ceiling, you might hate me on this one, and I think there's some Pelicans people out there. I just honestly, I've watched them play only a couple times. If they're in the East, maybe they could make some noise, but I think the best they can hope for is just make the playoffs. If they could make the second round, I think the matchup is going to be tough for them. I don't see it happening. Mavericks are super, super fun to watch, but this is what happens when your best 2 players can't play defense, right? They're defensive liabilities. So could Luka and Kyrie win a series or 2? Yeah, sure. They could just go off, but it would be 150 to 145 because they cannot guard anybody, and they've never really factored that in, unfortunately, and they probably should. Kings, if you've been watching recently, have not been playing well. It's not just kind of some little injury tweaks, but I just think that, I think I said this at the beginning, I don't necessarily always see it in them. I got the Warriors here too. Again, you could make the argument that they should be on top in front of the Lakers because when they play hard, they play really hard. But I think the ceiling is just they've been shown when they go against the really elite teams, they're kind of undermanned. All right, I'm going to put the Bulls in there too. Don't really know what they're doing right now, but it's certainly, as someone who just wants to make sure they actually make the playoffs, they certainly do have a little roller coaster of love there. But I think the playoffs are fine, and then they'll probably be a team that they're lucky if they make the top 8. I think that's all I had here, but I reserve the right to put one up, which means our lottery miracles, as in they kind of just want to get that pick. They want to make sure that they have the highest % chance they can, and they're not making the playoffs. Now, the Jazz obviously can make a bit of a run, and I think the one team in the East, because of teams getting hurt and one of them being the 10th spot right now in Atlanta, Brooklyn could pop up, but I actually don't think that they want to. Who knows? I could be wrong. Now, how that impacts us... There's not a lot to update, so I'm not going to do each of the stats in each of our teams. only thing to say is Luka's pulling away, and it really looks like, unless something crazy happens, points are his to lose. Assists, it's still Halliburton, but it's a bit tighter. Rebounds is the only one that might be a bit of a steal. Sabonis has it right now, but there are some people like Gobert just seems fixed. He really wants Defensive Player of the Year, which means he really wants to get a lot of rebounds. And now with Karl Anthony Towns not around him, maybe he gets a few more, and he's less than a rebound per game off, so that could be a tighter race than expected. All of the odds for the awards are pretty much the same as last time, so I won't go over them, except to say here, congratulations to Luka, which by Luka I mean Rennie, and Tatum now, that's 2 points, Chainer. So obviously making up for your lack of Embiidness. Tatum's trying to get you some points during the season to make sure it's nice and tight. They won the Players of the Month for February. Sadly, I didn't say Rookie of the Month we don't get points for, because I would have gotten a pretty good one there. But if my next rant that I'm about to go on in terms of my 2 cents is accurate and home stats are skewed, this could be good for me, because the Spurs play away the whole month. Means they're playing home a lot in March. Anyway, speaking of which, let's get to my 2 cents. After last time, when I essentially fixed the All-Star game for good and now there'll be no problems with it, I want to talk a little bit about legacy, because obviously we have 40,000 reasons to talk about stats, numbers, and what that means. Since the last post, obviously LeBron crosses 40,000 points. He was already number one, but that's a big milestone and something to pay attention to. Before I get to my other side points, it is kind of interesting. I was listening to a podcast, Six Trophies, if you've ever heard of it, Jason Concepcion, and in this case, Shea Serrano, kind of asked the question, what have you done 40,000 times? And his guess was, he was trying to think of, he's eaten 40,000 nacho chips in his life. And I was kind of trying to break it down, and I just recently, a couple of years ago, passed the 40 Mendoza line, but I can't speak to much of what I did in my first 5 to 10 years-ish. But if you count 40 years as a block, that's obviously I can do the math. That's what do you do 1,000 times a year, or approximately, and yes, Rennie, I know this isn't the exact number, but let's make it easy for people, about 3 times a day. So have I taken 40,000 poops? Probably not. I don't know how much I pooped as a kid. I don't know how much that spews things off. Have I eaten 40,000 nachos? Not wings, probably, even though we tried at the house in second year. Or wait, that was third. No, it was second year. There you go. It was something different. No, it was wings in third year, tacos in second year. That's it. Definitely not 40,000 tacos. We barely got through the 100. But it's kind of hard to think about, right? And in terms of just sheer volume and legacy, but that is the debate, right? I think there was a bit of that, Jordan LeBron debate before The Last Dance, and then The Last Dance hits. And I'm one of those people who actually do think that impacted LeBron, because ever since then, he really has put a vested effort into really focusing on his legacy and really chasing some of those big numbers. He really wants that one more trophy kind of thing. I think it did bother him how all of a sudden, because of The Last Dance, everyone started talking about Jordan as the greatest, when he maybe felt he had that conversation a bit more locked up. Now it's just a generational thing. I know, Shea Chainer, your kids are a bit young for this. Horst, Rennie, we've been around coaching kids enough. You know what it's like to try and debate new kids about this, or younger kids. And it does end up being just a my dad would beat up your dad kind of conversation when you talk about Jordan versus LeBron. And obviously there's going to be a generational bias, just like I'm sure there was that I don't remember. But if my dad was a basketball fan, we might have gotten those conversations of Jordan versus Russell or Chamberlain or Jabbar, so it's one of those things that I think every generation has their piece. So I'm less interested in that, because that really is a conversation more about, do you like someone at their peak, or do you like the longevity? And obviously that's LeBron's going to be claim to fame, is the fact that he is still, I think most people have seen it now, that how many points a year and how it's just a steady, almost exactly kind of linear line of points over time, when he just is super consistent, takes care of his body. We've talked about the chambers he brought into the, to the COVID bubble, all that stuff. That's going to be his bit, because everyone's having the same conversation now. If you go look at any other show, can Luka do it? Well, Luka doesn't take care of his body. So the odds of him playing when he's 40 at that level, probably not super high, or even his late 30s, right? Wembanyama, he's having an awesome year, but no chance. He's going to break after 6 or 7 years. It's just, he's super fun. I hope he doesn't. But tell me anyone who's that long that has lasted for 20 years, right? Obviously, it has to be that perfect combination. And I don't know if we can really bank on that or know what's going to happen. But what I also kind of led me to is just, how important stats are in basketball to compare eras, and points at least are non-negotiable. I was listening to another podcast, Pablo Torre Finds Out, when they brought on, and I'd actually read about this before, but I was interested in this, when they were bringing in people who are stats experts, and one person in particular, and I can send on the link if anyone's interested in it, that has had some controversy, because right now the Grizzlies, they were looking at, is there stat padding, and it's quite common that the person who's involved with that at the home stadium will be responsible for the stats. Now we have a lot of video evidence, so it's harder to fudge now. But they said in the 70s, obviously there's no tape to go back and look in the 60s and 70s to see, in some cases, was a rebound, it counted if they tipped it to their own teammate who actually grabbed the rebound. Did they both get a rebound? Did only one of them? And this person was pretty honest in the podcast. And again, I'd read about this. He's very vocal about, he worked for the Vancouver Grizzlies at the time, but his one example was Stockton made a pass to Malone, but Malone caught it, squared up, made a move, 2 dribbles, pull-up jumper, and he gave Stockton the assist. And then afterwards, when they were looking at him, because he was young, he was like 19 or 20 years old, being the stat guy there, and it was the official stats of the Grizzlies, he actually was praised and saying, well, technically that might not be assist, because even afterwards he was like, I might get in trouble for that one. Like that's probably not an assist. That didn't directly lead to the basket, which is supposed to be in the best interest of what an assist is. But they're like, yeah, we're a stars-based league. You're heavily encouraged. If it's a narrative that we want, you should push it. So there is a theory that some of those stats are going to be a little bit higher than they probably should be, whereas now in the modern game, there's still that advantage, but it's not quite as much. And the biggest way you can tell is the home versus road split. And actually, we have to get ready for this as Canadians. Apparently the Raptors were the worst in this from 96 to 99. So Carter in his rookie year was given 1.5 blocks per game, but that's only because the blocks that he had at home when he had his home stat counters were twice as much as than when he had on the road. So if you look at block shots, if you look at steals, if you look at turnovers, if you look at assists, it's a bit fuzzy, right? And so it was an interesting kind of conversation, just because I make a video for my friends. I'm part of the media now. I'm just including myself, even though just my friends sometimes watch this. When you're trying to evaluate players in basketball, it's like baseball in the sense that it really does come down to numbers, and we have to compare things. It's what gets people into Hall of Fames. It's what gets people to all decade teams, sometimes all NBA teams. Perfect example. Jokic has been pretty much like this for a while now, but every year there's always that narrative, maybe he's not the MVP. And it came out last year when they made the playoff run. All these commentators were like, oh my God, this guy's amazing. You're like, you have an MVP vote, but you haven't watched him play. It's not a prerequisite to watch every single game. You're going to, obviously, if you get paid to cover a certain team, you're going to follow that beat. You don't watch every player equally. So when people were really impressed that all of a sudden he was great, he's been doing that for the last couple of years. He is the best player in the league. It's at least I've watched enough to think it, but there are people that I miss a little bit. But anyway, so we do actually result on the numbers. So it's odd to think about how skewed they might be. The benefit is, at least, most teams are similar, even though the Raptors and the Grizzlies were worse. But their argument was they knew it was a numbers-based league. And if, Bryant Reeves had 9 rebounds versus 10 rebounds, 10 just looks better, right? And if it'll get you on SportsCenter, which for Canadian teams in the late 90s, obviously that was important because only one of those 2 teams is still in Canada. So we kind of are a sucker to them, but it's just interesting to think the comparison point. But typically you can compare amongst that era. So that the numbers are inflated in the 90s, in the 80s, as opposed to now that they tend to be a bit more consistent. But according to Jarrett Jackson Jr. and the Grizzlies, maybe not completely. Anyway, either way, points you can't really fudge, so congrats, LeBron. 40,000 poops. Well, I have to think I beat the clock. I won't know for sure until I edit this thing, and obviously I have to record it before I edit, so this one should be the shortest going. Madness is going to consume my life for about the next month, and hopefully for all of you as well. I know you're all into it, so we'll see what happens there. I'll definitely be doing a lot more this year, and I'll get to those videos obviously when I get to them, but I'll come back to this one post Madness, which is about a month once we know the March player of the month, and we start getting ready for that April push, because after that point, not a whole lot left to go until the playoffs. So till then, happy almost Madness.